The day I watched Karen Pemberton's face turn purple while standing in 3 inches of snow outside my house, I knew I'd made an enemy for life. My name is David Barrett, and I'm a mechanical engineer who specializes in geothermal heating systems. When I bought my house in Boulder, Colorado last spring, I saw potential where others saw problems. The property sat at the end of Maple Ridge Drive, a winding street in one of those upscale neighborhoods where people have more money than sense. The previous owners had installed a geothermal system that was impressive but underutilized. They'd tapped into a natural heat source running beneath the property, something that could do so much more than just warm the house. I spent the summer and fall designing and installing a heated walkway system, not the cheap electric coil kind that costs a fortune to run. I'm talking about a sophisticated hydronic system that used the existing geothermal setup to circulate heated fluid through tubes beneath my driveway, front walkway, and the public sidewalk in front of my property. The whole thing cost me about $15,000 in materials, but my labor was free since I did it myself. The first major snowfall hit in late November, right before Thanksgiving. While my neighbors were out at 6 in the morning with their shovels and snowblowers, my walkways were completely clear. The snow melted on contact, creating these perfect rectangles of dry pavement while everything around them turned into a winter wonderland. It was beautiful, efficient, and exactly what I'd hoped for. That's when Karen showed up. She came marching across the street at 7:30 that morning, wearing a puffy white coat that made her look like an angry marshmallow. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it gave her face a stretched quality, and her lips were pursed in that particular way that signals trouble. "Excuse me," she called out as I was heading back inside with my morning newspaper. "We need to talk about this situation." I turned around, genuinely confused. "What situation?" "This," she gestured dramatically at my clear walkways. "This is completely unacceptable." I looked at my perfectly maintained property, then back at her. "I'm sorry, but what exactly is the problem?" "The HOA has very specific guidelines about property modifications," she said, pulling out her phone and scrolling through something. "Any exterior alterations require board approval. You never submitted the proper paperwork." "It's a heating system under my walkway," I said, keeping my tone polite. "I didn't realize that required approval. I'm not changing the appearance of anything." "You absolutely changed the appearance," she snapped. "Your walkways are clear while everyone else's are covered in snow. It creates an aesthetic imbalance in the neighborhood." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "An aesthetic imbalance? Are you serious?" Her face flushed red. "I'm the HOA president, Mr. Barrett, and yes, I'm completely serious. You also need to address the safety hazard you've created." "Safety hazard? My walkways are the safest on the street. There's no ice, no slipping danger." "The runoff from your melting snow creates ice patches on the street," she insisted. "Mrs. Henderson nearly slipped yesterday evening. I'd actually thought about drainage when designing the system. Everything was graded to flow into the storm drains, exactly as it should. The runoff goes directly into the city drainage system. I made sure of that." "Be that as it may," Karen said, straightening her shoulders, "you need to remove this system or face daily fines of $500 until you come into compliance." $500 a day? That's insane. "That's the penalty for major unauthorized modifications," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You should have read your HOA agreement more carefully." I had read it, actually, cover to cover. Twice. "The agreement says that modifications requiring approval are those that alter the external appearance or structure of the property. My system is entirely underground." "I've already consulted with our HOA attorney," she said. "He agrees that this falls under modifications requiring approval. You have until Monday to begin removal, or the fines start. I'll be sending you an official letter this afternoon." She turned and walked away before I could respond, her boots crunching through the snow on the street. I went inside and pulled out my HOA paperwork, reading through it again with a fine-tooth comb. The modification clause was somewhat vague, which was probably intentional. It gave the board broad discretion to interpret what did and didn't require approval. I dealt with enough bureaucracy in my engineering work to know that vague rules were dangerous rules. The letter arrived via email at 2 p.m. It was formal, threatening, and signed by both Karen Pemberton as HOA president and someone named Patricia Sutherland as HOA secretary. The penalty structure was laid out in detail. $500 per day starting Monday, December 2nd, with the potential for a lien on my property if fines exceeded $10,000. I called an attorney friend of mine, Marcus Chen, who practiced real estate law in Denver. "They can probably make this stick," he said after I explained the situation. "HOA agreements are contracts, and Colorado courts generally uphold them unless they're blatantly unreasonable. The modification clause in yours is broad enough that a judge might side with the HOA. So what do I do?" "You could fight it, but that's expensive and time-consuming. Even if you win, you're looking at thousands in legal fees. The easier path might be to just apply for retroactive approval. And if they deny it, then you remove the system or pay the fines." I thanked him and hung up, frustrated. The whole situation was ridiculous. I'd improved my property, created something useful and efficient, and now I was being punished for it. That weekend, I did some research, not just on HOA law but on my specific neighborhood. Maple Ridge had been developed 15 years ago by a company called Summit Properties. The entire subdivision sat on top of an interesting geological formation. The same geothermal heat source that fed my system actually ran beneath most of the neighborhood. Here's where it gets interesting. When Summit Properties developed the area, they installed a community geothermal system. It was one of those feel-good green initiatives that developers love to advertise. A main heat line ran beneath several streets, with connection points to individual properties. Most homeowners had never bothered to connect to it, preferring traditional gas heating. But the system existed, maintained by the HOA itself through a contract with a local utility company. My property sat at a crucial junction point. The main heat line ran directly under my land before branching out to supply Oakwood Court, where Karen and about 15 other families lived. I spent Sunday afternoon in my basement, examining the geothermal setup more carefully. The previous owner had been an engineer too, and he documented everything meticulously. There were blueprints, permits, and maintenance records. That's when I found the really interesting part. The main community heat line ran through an access valve on my property. According to the installation documents, this valve was technically on private property, but it served the community system. There was an easement agreement allowing the HOA to maintain it, but the physical valve itself was in my basement. Monday morning arrived with another snowfall. My walkways were clear. Karen's weren't. At 9 a.m., I received an automated email from the HOA management company informing me that I'd been assessed a $500 fine for non-compliance. I called the HOA management company, a bland corporate outfit called Premier Community Management. I got bounced around to 3 different people before finally reaching someone named Todd who seemed to have actual authority. "I'd like to appeal the fine and apply for retroactive approval of my walkway heating system," I said. You'll need to submit a formal appeal in writing, Todd said in a bored voice. The board meets on the second Thursday of each month. Your appeal would be heard at the January meeting. That's 5 weeks away. The fines will be over $15,000 by then. The fines continue until you're in compliance, he said. That's standard policy. Let me speak to Karen Pemberton directly. Board members don't take direct calls. You can email Mrs. Pemberton through the HOA portal. I sent the email, keeping it professional and polite. I explained the system, its benefits, and its safety features. I offered to present detailed documentation at the next board meeting. I even offered to extend the system to other interested homeowners at cost. Her response came back in 20 minutes. Denied. Remove the system. Tuesday, another $500 fine. Wednesday, the same. By Friday, I was $1,500 in the hole with no end in sight. I'd also learned that Karen had been emailing other homeowners, warning them about my dangerous and unauthorized modifications. Several neighbors who'd previously complimented my clear walkways now avoided eye contact when I saw them. That Friday evening, I was in my basement doing routine maintenance on my heating system when I really looked at that community heat line valve. It was a substantial piece of equipment, maybe 3 feet tall, with multiple gauges and control wheels. A metal tag riveted to the side read, Summit Community Geothermal System Main Supply Valve Junction Point Alpha. I sat there for a long time thinking. The easement agreement allowed the HOA to access the valve for maintenance. It didn't say anything about me accessing it, and technically, if something went wrong with the valve, if it somehow got turned off, that wouldn't be my responsibility. The HOA was responsible for system maintenance. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I was angry, frustrated, and $2,000 in the hole with no good options. I turned the valve off, not all the way. That would have been too obvious. I closed it about 70%, enough to significantly reduce the heat flow but not completely stop it. Then I took my maintenance records and made a note. Checked community valve junction, all systems normal. Saturday morning was cold, below 20 degrees. My system worked perfectly. By noon, my phone started ringing. The first call was from Bill Morrison, who lived 3 houses down. Hey David, weird question. You know anything about the community heating system? Our heat is barely working. Sorry, Bill. I just used the system for my walkway. You might want to call the HOA. 3 more calls came over the next 2 hours. All from Oakwood Court. All complaining about heat problems. Sunday morning, there was an emergency HOA email. Several homes on Oakwood Court were experiencing heating issues. The management company had been contacted. Someone would investigate on Monday. Monday morning, another $500 fine for my walkway. Monday afternoon, a utility truck showed up and spent 3 hours checking various access points around the neighborhood. They couldn't figure out the problem. The main system was functioning, but heat delivery to Oakwood Court was somehow restricted. Tuesday morning, Karen Pemberton was at my door. Are you having any heating problems? She demanded without preamble. No, my system's working fine. Why? Half of Oakwood Court has no heat. The utility company can't find the problem. That's terrible, I said. Have you checked all the access points? They've checked everything except. She paused, her eyes narrowing. Your property has an access point. Does it? I've never really looked into the community system. I have my own setup. The main junction is in your basement, she said. I need to access it. Sure, let me get the easement paperwork and we can schedule a time. This is an emergency. I need access now. The easement agreement requires 24 hours notice for non-emergency access. Is this a system failure or just reduced capacity? Her jaw clenched. Reduced capacity. Then it's not an emergency under the terms of the easement. Submit a request through proper channels and I'll accommodate you within 24 hours. You're doing this deliberately, she hissed. I'm not doing anything. I'm just following the rules, just like you insisted I do with my walkway system. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She couldn't prove anything. She also couldn't access my basement without my permission or a court order. Fine, she said finally. I'll submit the formal request, but if I find out you've tampered with that valve, you'll regret it. I haven't tampered with anything, but you know what might help? If we could work together on this, maybe come to an arrangement about my walkway system. Never, she snapped and walked away. Wednesday morning, I received the formal access request. I approved it for Thursday afternoon. I also went into my basement that evening and opened the valve back up just a bit. Not all the way, but enough that the system would show maybe 40% functionality. Thursday afternoon, 2 utility workers and Karen showed up. I led them down to the basement, showed them the valve, and stood back while they examined it. Well, there's your problem, one of the workers said. Valve's partially closed. Is it? I said, moving closer to look. I don't really understand how it works. See this wheel? Someone turned it clockwise. That closes the valve and restricts flow. Karen's face was red. Mr. Barrett, did you close this valve? I have no idea how to operate it, I said honestly. I've never touched it. Is it possible it just shifted over time? It's been pretty cold, lots of ground movement with freeze-thaw cycles. The utility worker shook his head. These valves don't just shift. Someone turned it. Could it have been during the last maintenance visit? I suggested. When does the HOA do maintenance checks? Karen pulled out her phone, scrolling through emails. Her expression shifted. The last scheduled maintenance was 6 weeks ago. There you go, I said. Maybe whoever did the maintenance didn't open it all the way afterward. Easy mistake to make. The workers opened the valve completely, and I could hear the system hum as pressure equalized. They spent another 30 minutes checking gauges and making notes. After they left, Karen lingered in my basement looking at me with suspicion. This is very convenient timing. What is? The valve being closed right when we're having a dispute. Actually, it's inconvenient timing for me. I've been fined $2,500 while half your street has been dealing with heat issues. Neither of us is winning here. She didn't respond, just turned and walked up the stairs and out of my house. That evening, I got an email from Bill Morrison. He'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine about my walkway dispute with Karen. She's on a power trip, he wrote. Happened to the Johnsons last year over their fence. Cost them $8,000 before the board finally backed down. Be careful. Friday morning, another $500 fine. I was now at $3,000. I also received notice that the January board meeting was full and my appeal had been moved to February. I closed the valve again, this time to about 50%. The complaint started Saturday evening. Sunday, there was another emergency email. Monday, the utility truck was back. Tuesday, they were scratching their heads because the valve in my basement was fully open, but the system still wasn't delivering proper heat. What they didn't realize was that there was a secondary control point further down the line, accessible through an exterior panel on my property. The previous owner had installed it as a backup control, and it wasn't on any of the HOA's official diagrams. I'd found it in his documentation. Wednesday morning, I got a call from Premier Community Management. It was Todd again. Mr. Barrett, the HOA is requesting daily access to your property to monitor the geothermal system. Daily access isn't covered under the easement. They get access for maintenance purposes with proper notice. This is a maintenance issue. Then they can submit maintenance requests. I'll approve them according to the easement terms. Mr. Barrett, you're being difficult. I'm following the rules. That's what HOA agreements are about, right? Following the rules, I could hear him sigh. Mrs. Pemberton wants to schedule an emergency board meeting to discuss your walkway situation. Great. When? Tonight at 7 p.m. The bylaws require 72 hours notice for special meetings. For general membership meetings, yes. The board can meet with 24 hours notice for emergencies. Is my walkway an emergency? Mrs. Pemberton seems to think so. Fine. Where's the meeting? The community center on Maple Ridge Drive. I showed up at 6:55. The community center was a small building at the neighborhood entrance, used mainly for HOA meetings and the occasional book club. 5 board members sat at a long table at the front of the room. Karen was in the center, with Patricia Sutherland to her right. The others I didn't recognize. There were maybe a dozen other homeowners scattered in the audience chairs, probably there to watch the drama. Karen called the meeting to order and immediately moved to my agenda item. We're here to address the unauthorized modifications made by Mr. Barrett at 847 Maple Ridge Drive. Mr. Barrett, you've refused to remove your heated walkway system despite repeated violations notices. I've applied for retroactive approval, I said calmly. That application is pending. Your application was denied, Karen said. I emailed you the denial. That was your personal denial. I haven't received an official board vote. Patricia whispered something to Karen, who frowned. The board president has authority to make decisions on behalf of the board. Not according to the bylaws, I said, pulling out my copy. Section 7, Paragraph 3. Major decisions require a board vote. My application qualifies as a major decision because of the fine structure you've imposed. One of the other board members, an older man with gray hair, spoke up. He's right, Karen. We need to vote. Karen's expression could have curdled milk. Fine. Let's vote. All in favor of denying Mr. Barrett's application, say aye. Wait, I said. Don't I get to present my case first? The gray-haired man nodded. That's standard procedure. For the next 15 minutes, I walked them through the system. I had photos, documentation, thermal imaging showing the safety benefits, and drainage calculations proving there was no runoff hazard. I also had cost estimates showing I could extend the system to other properties for about $3,000 per home. This technology could be a selling point for the neighborhood, I concluded. Green energy, lower utility bills, safer walkways in winter. I'm not trying to cause problems. I'm trying to improve my property and potentially help others do the same. Several audience members applauded. Karen looked furious. All very impressive, she said coldly. But you still violated procedure by not getting approval first. That sets a dangerous precedent. What's to stop other homeowners from making unauthorized changes and asking for forgiveness later? That's a fair point, I acknowledged. Which is why I'm willing to pay a reasonable fine for the procedural violation. But $25,000 in fines for a system that improves the neighborhood seems excessive. The gray-haired man spoke again. I move that we approve Mr. Barrett's system retroactively, with a one-time penalty of $500 for the procedural violation. Second, another board member said, a younger woman with red hair. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Discussion. This seems vindictive, Karen, the red-haired woman said. The system isn't hurting anyone. If anything, it makes the neighborhood look better maintained. It also creates a safety hazard with the meltwater, Karen insisted. He showed us the drainage calculations, the gray-haired man said. Everything flows into the storm drains properly. They argued for another 10 minutes. Finally, Karen called for a vote. 3 board members voted to approve my system. Karen and Patricia voted against it. Motion carries, the gray-haired man announced. Mr. Barrett's Walkway heating system is approved. All existing fines except the $500 procedural penalty are waived. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt a sense of impending doom as I watched Karen's expression. She wasn't accepting defeat. She was planning something. After the meeting, several homeowners approached me about installing similar systems. I gave them my contact information and headed home, feeling like I'd won a battle but not the war. Thursday morning, I received an email from Karen. While your Walkway system has been approved, it has come to our attention that you may have tampered with HOA infrastructure. Specifically, the community geothermal system valve located on your property has been repeatedly found in a closed position, causing heating disruptions for multiple homes. If you are found to have deliberately interfered with this system, you will face legal action including but not limited to criminal charges for property damage and civil liability for damages. I read it 3 times. She was threatening me, but she still couldn't prove anything. Friday afternoon, I got a more concerning email. The HOA board has voted to relocate the main geothermal junction valve from your property to HOA common space. This work will begin next week and will require excavation on your property under the terms of the existing easement. You are required to provide access. I called Marcus Chen immediately. Can they do this? I asked after explaining the situation. Depends on the easement language, he said. Forward it to me. I sent him the easement documents and waited. He called back an hour later. This is interesting, he said. The easement allows access for maintenance and repair, but it doesn't explicitly allow for relocation or modification of the infrastructure. They'd need your permission for that, or they'd need to buy the easement rights from you. What if I don't give permission? They'd have to take you to court and prove that relocation is necessary. Given that the system has worked fine for 15 years, that might be tough. But David, if you've been messing with that valve, you need to stop. If they can prove you deliberately disrupted service, you're looking at real legal trouble. I understand. Do you though? Because utility interference can be a criminal matter in Colorado. If 15 families lost heat because of something you did, you could face charges. I hung up feeling genuinely worried. What had started as a petty revenge move had spiraled into something potentially serious. Saturday morning, I went into my basement and opened both control valves completely. Oakwood Court's heat was restored within hours. Sunday, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Patricia Sutherland. "Mr. Barrett, I'm calling off the record," she said, her voice nervous. "I'm the HOA secretary, and I need to tell you something. Karen is planning to file a police report accusing you of utility tampering. She's been documenting every heating disruption and correlating them with your Walkway dispute. Why are you telling me this? Because I resigned from the board this morning. I can't be part of this anymore. Karen has become obsessed with this situation. She's spending HOA money on legal consultations, engineering reports, and now she wants to involve the police. It's gotten out of hand." "What engineering reports?" "She hired someone to analyze the heating system disruptions. They're going to present findings that the valve on your property was deliberately manipulated." My stomach dropped. "When is she filing the police report?" "Monday morning. I thought you should know." "Thank you, Patricia." I spent Sunday evening thinking hard about my options. I could deny everything, but if they had engineering reports showing the valve had been repeatedly adjusted, that denial wouldn't hold up. I could come clean and hope for leniency, but that meant admitting to something that had caused real harm to innocent people who had nothing to do with my dispute with Karen. or I could get ahead of it. Monday morning at 8 a.m., I walked into the Boulder Police Department and asked to speak to an officer. I was directed to a Detective Sarah Mendoza, who listened to my story with increasing concern. "Let me get this straight," she said. "You deliberately interfered with a utility system serving 15 homes because you were angry about an HOA dispute?" "Yes," I said. "I know it was wrong. I'm here to report it before anyone else does and to take responsibility." "Mr. Barrett, this is serious. People could have been hurt. In this weather, losing heat can be dangerous, especially for elderly residents or young children." "I know. I restored full service yesterday, and I'm prepared to pay for any damages. I just want to do the right thing now." She took a detailed statement, then made some calls. An hour later, I was being formally interviewed with a recording device running. I told them everything, including the timeline of the valve manipulations and my reasons for doing it. "We'll need to investigate," Detective Mendoza said. "Don't leave town. We'll probably file charges within the week." I left the police station feeling sick but also oddly relieved. At least I'd taken control of the narrative. Tuesday morning, Karen filed her police report. By Tuesday afternoon, she learned that I'd already confessed. Wednesday, Detective Mendoza called me. "We've completed our preliminary investigation. We're charging you with 1 count of criminal mischief for the utility interference. It's a Class 2 misdemeanor. You'll need to appear in court." "I understand. However, there's something else you should know. During our investigation, we discovered that Mrs. Pemberton has been using HOA funds inappropriately. She spent over $8,000 on legal consultations and engineering reports related to your case, all without proper board approval. We've referred that matter to the district attorney's office as potential embezzlement. I didn't know what to say. We also found some interesting communications," the detective continued. "Mrs. Pemberton has been emailing other homeowners encouraging them to file false complaints against you. That's witness tampering. And there are emails suggesting she wanted to impose the fines on you specifically because of a personal grievance, not because of any legitimate HOA concern." "What personal grievance?" "Apparently, her son applied for a job at the engineering firm where you work last year. He didn't get it. She believes you were involved in that decision." I actually had been on the hiring committee. We'd interviewed her son, Brandon Pemberton, and decided he wasn't a good fit. He'd been arrogant, underprepared, and had bombed the technical questions. I'd forgotten all about it. "So this whole thing was personal revenge?" I asked. "It appears that way. Look, what you did was wrong, Mr. Barrett. You put people at risk and you'll face consequences. But it's also clear you were provoked and targeted unfairly. I've included that context in my report. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. I was formally charged with criminal mischief and pled guilty. The judge gave me a suspended sentence of 30 days in jail, 1 year probation, and ordered me to pay restitution of $3,000 to cover increased heating costs for the affected homeowners during the service disruptions. Karen was charged with embezzlement and witness tampering. The district attorney's investigation revealed she'd been misusing HOA funds for over a year, not just on my case but on various personal legal matters. The total amount was close to $30,000. In January, there was a special HOA meeting to address the crisis. The gray-haired board member, whose name I learned was Robert Chen, became the interim president. He immediately moved to reform the HOA's policies, including implementing a proper appeals process for disputes and requiring multiple board signatures for expenditures over $1,000. At that same meeting, I stood up and addressed the community. "I want to apologize to everyone on Oakwood Court. What I did was wrong. petty and potentially dangerous. I let my anger at an unfair situation cloud my judgment, and innocent people suffered because of it. I'm sorry." Several people nodded. A few looked angry. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman I'd heard about during the initial complaint, stood up. "I appreciate your apology, Mr. Barrett," she said. "What you did was wrong. But I also want to say that Karen Pemberton made all of our lives miserable for years with her power trips and arbitrary rules. I'm not excusing what you did, but I understand the frustration that led to it." Other homeowners spoke up with similar sentiments. It became clear that Karen had been a problem for a long time, and my situation had just been the catalyst that finally brought it to light. February brought more developments. Karen pled guilty to the embezzlement charges and was sentenced to 6 months in jail and 5 years probation. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Her husband, who I'd never met, quietly put their house up for sale. I completed my probation requirements without incident. The judge had ordered me to do community service, so I spent weekends that winter helping the city maintain public facilities, including snow removal at community centers. By March, 3 other homeowners had asked me to install heated walkway systems on their properties. I did the work at cost, making no profit, just trying to prove that the technology could benefit the neighborhood. Robert Chen, the interim HOA president, officially endorsed the systems in the HOA newsletter. Spring arrived, and with it came a sense of renewal. The neighborhood felt different. There were new board members, new policies, and a general sense that maybe we'd all learned something from the chaos. One Saturday in April, I was working in my front yard when Bill Morrison walked over. "Hey David, wanted to let you know the heated walkway you installed for us last month is great. Janet and I are really happy with it, glad to hear it. Also, I'm running for HOA president in the regular elections next month, was hoping you'd support my campaign." "Absolutely. What's your platform?" "Common sense," he said with a grin. "Crazy idea, right?" I laughed. "Revolutionary." He won the election easily. His first act as president was to formally update the HOA modification policy, creating a clear distinction between structural changes requiring advance approval and functional improvements that could be approved retroactively. His second act was to rename the community center the Patricia Sutherland Community Center in honor of her whistleblowing and integrity. As for me, I stayed in the neighborhood. Some people thought I should have moved after everything that happened, but I liked my house. I liked my heated walkways. And honestly, I'd worked hard to improve the property, and I wasn't going to let one bad situation drive me away from a place I'd chosen to call home. That summer, I started a small consulting business helping homeowners design and install geothermal systems. Word had spread beyond my neighborhood, and I was getting calls from people all over Boulder County. What had started as a personal project had turned into something bigger. In June, I got an unexpected email from Brandon Pemberton, Karen's son. "Mr. Barrett, I wanted to reach out and apologize for my mother's behavior. I knew she was angry about my job rejection, but I had no idea she'd taken it so far. For what it's worth, I didn't get that job because I wasn't qualified, not because of any conspiracy. I've done a lot of growing up this past year. I'm sorry for the trouble our family caused you." I wrote back thanking him for the apology and wishing him well. It was a small gesture, but it felt like another piece of closure. September brought the first cool nights, hints of the winter to come. I spent an evening checking my heating system, making sure everything was ready for another season. The valve in my basement, the one that had caused so much trouble, was now monitored by the HOA through a smart system that alerted them to any pressure changes. I'd agreed to the installation, seeing it as a reasonable safeguard. As I worked, I thought about everything that had happened. I'd made a mistake, a significant one, driven by anger and a desire for petty revenge. I'd faced consequences, learned lessons, and tried to make amends. Karen had made bigger mistakes, driven by personal vendettas and unchecked power. She'd faced bigger consequences. The whole situation had been a masterclass in how disputes escalate, how small disagreements become major conflicts when pride and stubbornness take over. It had also been a lesson in community, in how a neighborhood is only as healthy as the systems and people governing it. In October, the first snow fell. My walkways cleared automatically, just as they had the year before. But this time, when neighbors walked past, they waved and smiled. Some stopped to chat. A few asked technical questions about their own systems. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman from Oakwood Court, stopped by one morning with a plate of cookies. "Thank you for the system you installed for us," she said. "My grandson helped me choose it after you sent around those information packets. I feel so much safer now, knowing I won't slip on ice." "I'm glad I could help, Mrs. Henderson." "You know," she said, settling into one of my porch chairs, "this whole mess last year was unfortunate, but some good came from it. The neighborhood is better now. We have better leadership, better policies. Sometimes it takes a crisis to create positive change." "I suppose that's true, though I wish it hadn't required the crisis in the first place." "Don't we all?" she said with a knowing smile. "Don't we all?" After she left, I stood on my porch watching the snow fall on clear walkways, thinking about her words: crisis and change, mistakes and growth. Conflict and resolution. My phone rang. It was another potential client asking about geothermal systems. I smiled and answered the call, ready to talk about heat exchange rates and installation timelines, about making homes more efficient and winters more manageable. The neighborhood had changed. I had changed. And somehow, through all the conflict and consequences, through the anger and the apologies, we'd all ended up in a better place. Not perfect, not without scars, but better. And on a cold Colorado morning with clear walkways and second chances, better was good enough. November arrived with characteristic Colorado unpredictability, swinging between crisp sunny days and sudden snowstorms. My consulting business continued to grow steadily. I'd completed installations for 8 homeowners in Maple Ridge and had started getting calls from other neighborhoods across Boulder. One evening, Robert Chen called me. Since stepping down as interim HOA president after Bill Morrison's election, he'd remained active in neighborhood affairs. "David, I wanted to run something past you," he said. "Bill and I have been talking with the city about making Maple Ridge a pilot neighborhood for sustainable energy initiatives. Your geothermal work has caught their attention." "What kind of pilot program?" "The city would provide grants to homeowners who want to install geothermal systems. They'd also help fund a neighborhood-wide expansion of the existing underground heat network. You'd be the primary contractor." It was an exciting opportunity, but I hesitated. "Robert, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but are you sure the neighborhood wants me that involved? After everything that happened?" "David, you made a mistake. You owned it, paid for it, and moved on. That's more than most people do. The neighborhood respects that. Besides, you're the expert we need." Over the next month, I worked with the city's sustainability office to develop a proposal. The plan was ambitious. Expand the geothermal network to cover 70% of Maple Ridge, upgrade the existing infrastructure, and provide subsidized installations to interested homeowners. In December, the City Council approved the project with a budget of $800,000 spread over 2 years. The program would create jobs, reduce carbon emissions, and establish Boulder as a leader in residential geothermal technology. The announcement made local news. I did an interview with the Boulder Daily Camera, explaining the technology and the benefits. The reporter asked about the previous year's controversy. "Look, I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen," I said. "I made a serious mistake that hurt people, but I learned from it." Sometimes our worst moments teach us our most important lessons. This project is partly about making amends, showing that positive change can come from negative situations. The article ran with a photo of me standing in front of my clear walkways, discussing the future of neighborhood heating. It was strange seeing myself presented as an expert and community leader less than a year after being charged with a crime. Christmas came and went. I spent it with my sister's family in Denver, grateful for their support through the difficult year. My nephew, who was studying engineering at Colorado State, peppered me with questions about geothermal systems and seemed genuinely excited about the work I was doing. "Uncle David, you basically created a whole new business from a fight with your HOA," he said. "That's pretty cool." "That's one way to look at it," I said, "though I wouldn't recommend the approach." January brought the start of the pilot program. We began with infrastructure upgrades, bringing in drilling equipment to extend the network and improve distribution. The work was noisy and disruptive, but the neighborhood tolerated it well, understanding the long-term benefits. I hired a crew of 4 technicians to help with installations. One of them was a young woman named Emma Rodriguez, who just graduated from CU Boulder with a degree in mechanical engineering. She was smart, enthusiastic, and picked up the technical details quickly. "This is exactly the kind of work I wanted to do," she told me during a lunch break one day. Practical applications of sustainable technology. Most of my classmates went into aerospace or software. This feels more meaningful. "It is," I agreed. "You're directly improving people's quality of life. That's worth something." By February, we'd completed installations for 12 more homes. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Homeowners loved the clear walkways, the energy savings, and the environmental benefits. One afternoon, I got a call from a reporter at a Denver TV station. They wanted to do a story about the Maple Ridge project for their evening news segment on climate solutions. The interview took place on a snowy February morning. The reporter, a polished woman in her 30s, asked good questions about the technology, the costs, and the scalability. "Could this model work in other neighborhoods?" she asked. "Absolutely. Any area with suitable geology could implement something similar. The initial infrastructure investment is significant, but the long-term benefits are substantial. Lower energy costs, reduced carbon emissions, safer walkways in winter. It's a practical application of technology we've had for decades but haven't fully utilized. And you started all this because of a dispute with your HOA. That's where it began, yes. Though I wouldn't say the dispute started it as much as it revealed an opportunity. Sometimes conflict forces us to think creatively and find solutions we wouldn't have considered otherwise. The story aired that evening and got picked up by several other news outlets. By the next morning, I had emails from city councils, community organizations, and homeowners across Colorado asking about implementing similar programs. March brought warmer weather and easier working conditions. We accelerated the installation pace, completing 20 more homes. The neighborhood had visibly changed. In winter, you could tell who had the system by looking at their walkways. Clear pavement marked participation in what had become a community-wide transformation. Not everyone participated, of course. Some homeowners couldn't afford the subsidized installation cost, which even with city grants was still around $1,500. Others were skeptical of new technology or simply preferred traditional methods. Bill Morrison worked to address the affordability issue, setting up a neighborhood fund to help low-income residents cover installation costs. The response was generous, with many of the wealthier homeowners contributing significant amounts. "This is what community should be," Bill said at a neighborhood gathering in April. "People helping each other, working together toward common goals. That's what got lost in recent years, but we're finding it again." April also brought resolution to Karen Pemberton's legal situation. She completed her jail sentence and began her probation period. I heard through neighborhood gossip that she and her husband had moved to Colorado Springs, making a fresh start away from Boulder. I felt complicated emotions about that. Part of me was glad she was gone, that the source of conflict had been removed. But another part felt sad about how everything had unfolded. Despite her actions, despite the harm she'd caused, she was still a person who'd made mistakes and was now living with the consequences. I'd made mistakes too. We all had. The difference was in how we responded to those mistakes and whether we learned from them. May brought the official halfway point of the pilot program. We'd completed installations for 48 homes, upgraded the infrastructure network, and established Maple Ridge as a model for sustainable residential heating. The city's sustainability office reported that the neighborhood's carbon emissions had dropped by 18%, exceeding projections. There was a celebration at the community center, with city council members, local officials, and participating homeowners. I gave a short speech thanking everyone involved and emphasizing the collaborative nature of the project. "This wasn't my achievement," I said. "This was a community deciding to do something different, to embrace change and work together. I just provided the technical expertise. You all provided the vision and the commitment." After the formal program, people mingled over refreshments. Mrs. Henderson approached me with her grandson, a tall young man in his 20s. "Mr. Barrett, this is Thomas. He's the one who helped me decide to get the system installed." "Nice to meet you, Thomas." "Mr. Barrett, I'm actually an engineering student at CU. I'm wondering if you might need summer interns for your company." I glanced at Emma, who was standing nearby. She smiled and nodded. "Actually, we could use the help. Send me your resume." Summer arrived with warm sunshine and construction season in full swing. Thomas joined us as an intern and proved to be a valuable addition to the team. We completed another 30 installations between June and August, bringing the total to 78 homes out of about 130 in the neighborhood. In July, I got a letter from the Colorado Energy Office. They were interested in creating a statewide program based on the Maple Ridge model and wanted me to serve as a technical consultant. It would mean travel, meetings, and helping other communities develop similar initiatives. I accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to scale the impact of what we'd started. Over the next several months, I worked with communities in Fort Collins, Grand Junction, and Durango to assess feasibility and develop implementation plans. The work was fulfilling in a way my previous engineering job never had been. I was creating tangible improvements in people's lives, contributing to environmental sustainability, and building something meaningful. September marked the beginning of the second winter season with my heated walkway system. This time, there was no controversy, no angry HOA president demanding removal, no petty revenge plots, just clear walkways, lower utility bills, and a neighborhood that had found a better way to function. On the anniversary of my first confrontation with Karen, I stood on my front porch watching snow melt on contact with my walkway. Bill Morrison walked by with his dog and stopped to chat. "Hard to believe it's been a year," he said. "A lot has changed. For the better, I'd say. Though we took a rough path to get here." "That we did. You know, I was thinking the other day about how this all started, a dispute over rules and procedures, escalating into something that hurt a lot of people. But in the end, it forced us to examine how we were operating as a community. Sometimes you need disruption to create improvement." "I'm not sure I'd recommend disruption as a strategy," I said. "But I get what you mean," he laughed. "Fair enough. Hey, are you coming to the holiday party next month? We're doing it at the community center again." "I'll be there." As he walked away, I thought about his words. Disruption and improvement. The rough path to better outcomes. It was true that good had come from the conflict, but I wondered if there could have been another way. Could we have achieved the same positive changes without the mistakes, the harm, the legal consequences? Probably not. Some lessons only get learned the hard way. Some transformations require crisis to catalyze change. The holidays arrived with more snow and more clear walkways. The neighborhood looked beautiful. Lights twinkling on houses, families gathering for celebrations, the community center hosting events and parties. At the holiday party, I found myself talking to newcomers who'd moved to Maple Ridge specifically because of the geothermal system and the neighborhood's reputation for sustainability and community cooperation. "We looked at a lot of neighborhoods," one woman told me. "But when we heard about what you all were doing here, about the community coming together after difficulties to create something positive, we knew this was where we wanted to be." That comment stuck with me. The neighborhood story, our story, had become something larger than the sum of its parts. It wasn't just about heated walkways or energy efficiency. It was about resilience, redemption, and the possibility of transformation. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on everything that had happened. The conflict, the mistakes, the consequences, and the unexpected opportunities that had emerged from chaos. I thought about Karen Pemberton sometimes, wondering if she'd found peace in Colorado Springs, if she'd learned from her mistakes the way I'd tried to learn from mine. I hoped so. Everyone deserved second chances, even if those chances looked different than expected. I thought about the community and how it had evolved. Better leadership, better policies, better relationships between neighbors. The geothermal project had been a catalyst, but the real change had been in how people chose to interact with each other. And I thought about myself, about who I'd been a year ago and who I'd become. I'd been an engineer focused on technical problems, somewhat disconnected from broader community concerns. Now I was running a business, consulting on statewide initiatives, and actively participating in neighborhood governance. The heated walkway that had started everything continued to work flawlessly, melting snow and providing safe passage through winter weather. But it had become more than just a convenience feature. It was a reminder of lessons learned, mistakes corrected, and the sometimes messy process of growth and change. January arrived with new projects, new challenges, and new opportunities. The statewide program was moving forward. My consulting business was expanding. The Maple Ridge pilot program was being studied as a model for other communities. Life moved on, as it always does, carrying us forward into uncertain futures shaped by our choices, our mistakes, and our willingness to learn and grow. On a cold January morning, with clear walkways stretching before me and a neighborhood transformed by conflict and cooperation, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel after everything that had happened. I felt grateful for second chances. Grateful for communities willing to forgive and move forward. Grateful for the unexpected opportunities that emerge from difficult situations. The heated walkway remained, efficient and effective, doing exactly what I'd designed it to do. But its real legacy wasn't the technology or the energy savings, or even the business it had spawned. Its real legacy was the reminder that how we handle conflict matters, that mistakes can be corrected, and that communities grow stronger not by avoiding difficulties, but by facing them honestly and working together to create something better. And on that cold January morning, standing in front of my house in Boulder, Colorado, watching snow melt on contact with warm pavement, that lesson felt like the most valuable thing I'd ever learned.